Hi, hello, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Maddie. I like to read books, obviously. And for today's video, I'm going to be doing every single book on my physical TBR. The reason why I'm doing this video is because I have future plans of doing more videos about reading books on my physical TBR, like TBR takedown videos or something to that effect, because I want to read all the books on my physical TBR. I bought them for a reason to read them, so I should read them. And I'm not gonna lie, I did count all the books on my physical TBR at this current moment because I thought I had about like 25 books and I had almost double that. So, even just more reason why I should read the books that I own, maybe not buy new books except for anticipated releases because I'm going to read those regardless. But anyways, let's just jump right into it and go over every single book on my physical TBR. Okay, this is not really safe because I'm currently standing on a chair and my phone is on a tripod that is also standing on a chair. The top shelves of my bookshelves are some of my romance books, and I have a few that I haven't read yet that I have to show off. The first one being Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I don't think this is a romance book, but I kind of just have it placed up here. It feels more like a contemporary book, a literary fiction book that has romance in it. So, not a romance book per se, but I swear everyone has read this book except me. I feel like it was really popular a few years ago, and I really do want to read it. I just still haven't gotten around to it, and I have owned this book for over a year now, so convince me to read this. The next book is The Truth According to Ember by Danica Nava. I was actually gifted this book from a book box subscription called Aardvark, and they were very kind to give me this and a few other books. This is another book that I am very interested to read in. I feel like I've seen it around a little bit, but not a ton, and I honestly don't know too much about it, and I kind of want to keep it that way, so I'm surprised when I do read it. Then I have Alone with You in the Ether by Olive Blake. I have read her other book, One for My Enemy, and I really enjoyed it, so I do want to read this book. For whatever reason, I just have never gotten around to it. This is another one where I don't think it's like a straight romance book, but it does have romance in it, so I'm putting it on my romance shelf for now. Oh, and it literally says it's a love story, so maybe it is just a straight up romance book. But I feel like it explores more topics than just the romance itself, if that makes sense. I really want to read this. I just haven't gotten around to it, which is going to be the theme of today's video. Let's jump over to my next shelf. This is another romance shelf, or mostly romance bookshelf. I feel like a classic book in like 2014 that I have not yet read is Anna and the French Kiss, which, look at this cover, isn't it just so endearing and cute and such a product of its time? I thrifted this book a couple years ago. I do want to read it. I feel like I have to be in the mood for a YA teen 2010s book to read it because those books definitely have a specific vibe to them and I want to be in the mood for it. And I've read every other book on this shelf. Look at me reading books. Now on to the more fantasy section of my bookshelves. I have book 2 of the duology, Where the Library Hides. I actually don't own the first book right now, but I do have it on my Kindle through Kindle Unlimited. If you saw my last book haul video, then you know I recently purchased this and I got it for like $5, and it's a Barnes & Noble exclusive edition. So it was a steal. I had to buy it. I also have Babel by Arv Kwong on my physical TBR. I really want to read this book. I'm going to read this book soon because it's just one of those books that I feel like once I start reading it, I'm going to love it. And I feel like it might be a 5-star read for me. But this is like a fantasy, historic fiction, dark academia book that just sounds really interesting and really compelling. So, very intrigued by it. Then I have Mistress of Lies. This is another book that the BookBox subscription Aardvark gifted me. I honestly don't know too much about this book other than it's a fantasy book and it says it's dark, sexy, and twisty. So there you go. Then I have Evocation. I think that's how you pronounce the word, but don't quote me on that. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. This is by S.T. Gibson. This is another book from Aardvark and another book that I don't really know too much about. Seems like it follows the main character David. He's a psychic prodigy, but the power comes with a price, and the devil has come to collect on that price. So, sounds very interesting. Sounds a little bit dark. On to my next shelf. Obviously, I've read all of these Stephanie Garber books, but one book on the shelf that I haven't read yet is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This was also featured in my last video, the book haul. This is a half price books find. It was like $5 or $6 and it doesn't have the dumb Netflix logo on it, so it was a win for me. This is a YA fantasy book. I believe it has a heist. I believe it has found family. I honestly don't know too much about it because I haven't read the first trilogy, the Shadow and Bone trilogy that this duology is based off of, so yeah, I need to read that trilogy first, and then I'll get to this book. Another book is Dreams Lie Beneath by Rebecca Ross. This is a book that I actually bought for one of my friends. We are buying books for each other that we haven't read before, and we are annotating them and then exchanging the books. So I'm going to be reading this book and fully annotating it and then gifting it to my friend. But I believe this is a YA fantasy. If not, it's just a fantasy book, and I believe the magic is based around dreams, so it sounds really interesting to me, and I can't wait to read it. I read The Divine Rivals or the Letters of Enchantment duology by Rebecca Ross and really enjoyed it. So I'm excited for this book. The final book on this shelf, at least, is A Winter's Promise. I'm pretty sure this is a French book that was translated into English. My French is not good enough to read an entire book in French, but this is a fantasy book and it just seems very whimsical and magical, and I believe somebody said it has Howl's Moving Castle vibes, which sold me on the book because I love that franchise. And then, because I don't want to move the camera down, there's one book beneath this shelf, Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. I love Adrienne Young's books. I've read The Unmaking of June Farrow, and then I read her new release, A Sea of Unspoken Things. Both were 5 stars for me. So I am really excited to read this book because I feel like it will be good. It says this is a deeply atmospheric story about ancestral magic, an unsolved murder, and a second chance at true love, which sounds right up my alley of a book that I would love to read. We're now on the floor because we're getting into the depths of my bookshelves. This is my general fiction, literary fiction section, and it has a lot of books that I have not read yet. One of them being Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. Honestly, I don't know if this book belongs in this section, but I just have it here for now. Found this book outside. Somebody was doing a yard sale and it was completely free, so I had to get it. I have read a few other of John Green books before, The Fault in Our Stars and Looking for Alaska, and I remember really loving both those books as a teenager, but like I said, I have to be in a specific mood for that type of genre of book, but I will read this one day. Maybe I should do a video rereading the books that I love as a teenager. That could be a good idea. Let me know. Another book I have is Water for Elephants. I've seen the movie, haven't read the book. This was a thrifted book. I bought it because it was a good deal. It was like a few dollars. But I really do love books about circuses, oddly enough. So I do want to read this book one day. Another book is The Time Traveler's Wife. I have seen the movie and I've also seen the HBO show, but I have yet to read the book. A common theme. I have The Lovely Bones. I've seen the movie, haven't read the book. I do want to read this one day. I just don't know when. I feel like it's going to make me cry because it's a sad story. Then I have I Who Have Never Known Men. This is maybe more of a classic than a literary fiction book, but once again, I don't know. This is about a group of women who are deep underground, imprisoned in a cage, watched over by guards, and these women have no memory of how they got there, no notion of time, and vaguely remember their lives before. The book follows a girl who will soon show herself to be the key to the others' escape in survival in the strange world that awaits them above. I really want to read this book. I have heard good things about it, and it's quite a short read, so I could definitely read this book if I really wanted to. I also have The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. I believe this is the sequel or the follow up to The Handmaid's Tale, which I have read The Handmaid's Tale, and I really enjoyed that novel. I want to reread that and then read this book because it's been several years since I've read The Handmaid's Tale. So I know I'm just like forgetting a lot of the detail of that story and that world. One day I will read this, but once I reread The Handmaid's Tale first. And I also have A Last Grace by Margaret Atwood as well. I have seen the Netflix show of this, but I have yet to read the book. But this book is really interesting to me. It is a true crime book about a real life crime. It follows Grace Marks, who has been convicted in her involvement in the vicious murders of her employer. Some believe she's innocent, others believe that she is evil. Now she's serving a life sentence and claims to have no memory of it. But an up and coming expert in the field listens to her story, while bringing her closer and closer to the day she cannot remember. So, yes, it is based on a real life crime event, but it is a fictional take on it. However, I really love the show, so I do want to read the book. Then I have The Virgin Suicides. I don't really know why I bought this, to be honest. I thrifted it. It was a couple of dollars. This is another book that I feel like is a classic or a modern classic. I have seen the movie, but it's been a really long time since I watched it. So one day I'll read this book. I've heard mixed reviews on it, so that's why I'm kind of like about it. My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I've read other books by this author and I really enjoyed them, so I do want to read this book. It's about a woman who I believe tries to sleep for a year. We shall see how this one goes. The Book Thief, which I feel like is a classic that I have yet to read. One day I will read it though. I have The Vanishing Half, which I believe is about two twins who are separated and then meet up later in life. Also, really want to read this. I have The Glass Castle, which is a memoir. I have seen the movie before. I actually really love the movie, so I do want to read this memoir. I've heard nothing but good things about it, so I am excited to read it. I have The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. This is another book that I found at the thrift store. It was an impulse buy. It was a couple of dollars. And I have wanted to read a book by this author before because I've just seen her books destroy people, so I'm very curious about it. I don't really know much about it besides it's a historic fiction and it takes place in Alaska, and it's quite a big book. So one day I will read this. I just don't know when. Now on to my mystery and thriller books on my physical TBR. I still need to complete the Inheritance Games series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I've read the first two books, but I still need to read The Final Gambit and then The Brothers Hawthorne, which is the spin-off series, I believe. I also have to read The Guest by Emma Cline. I have not read a book by this author before, but I'm very intrigued by her books. And this is about an unwanted guest that overstays. So, I don't know, it just sounds really interesting and also very annoying. I also have to read Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I have seen the movie, haven't read the book, but I've read other books by this author and have enjoyed them. This is the last book I need to read by this author, so I'm very curious by it because I feel like this is her most popular book and her most well-loved book. I also have Tell Me Everything. This is a mix between a fiction and a memoir, I believe. Yeah, it's part memoir, part literary true crime. It's a landmark investigation in the female private investigator who helped crack it open. I do want to read this book. I haven't really heard too many people talk about it. It does sound like a very insightful read. Then I have A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. This book is unhinged. It's a food critic who has a quite literal, ferocious appetite for her lovers. This is a book about women's wrongs, and I love to read a book like that sometimes. And these are all of the classics that I have yet to read. They are on the bottom shelf of my bookshelf. I would literally have to lay on the floor to show them off, and I don't want to do that because that would hurt my body. But before we get into my classics, I realized I had one book on my special editions bookshelf that I have yet to read. It's Heartless by Marissa Meyer. A friend kindly gifted me this special edition. I have read other books by Marissa Meyer before and I really enjoyed them. And I feel like this is a popular book by her besides Cinder, so I'm really excited to read this book and cry. Cry at the end. Let's speedrun the classics that I have that I need to read still. Crime and Punishment. I won this book and I have not read it. I've had it for years. And I have Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I also have Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. And finally, Persuasion by Jane Austen. These are the last 3 books that I need to read by Jane Austen. And then I can say I read every single book by Jane Austen. The Grapes of Wrath. Still haven't read it. Maybe one day I will, but I don't know. The Hauntings of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I have read other works by Shirley Jackson and I really enjoyed them, so I do want to read this, but I feel like I need to be in fall to read this book. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. I love the Alice in Wonderland franchise. I have never read the book. I do want to read the book one day though. The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is another classic that I need to read. A Room of One's Own and Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Both classics that I need to read. The Phantom of the Opera. I have seen the movie. I actually love the movie. So I do want to read the book because I'm very curious by it. Tender is the Night. I love the cover. I don't really know about this author anymore. And then I also have, I think this is pronounced Villette by Charlotte Bronte. I've read Jane Eyre, one of my favorite classics of all time, so I do want to read this book. And then the final book on my physical TBR is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, which I have never read a book by Anne Bronte before, but I have read her sister's work, so I do want to read this. And that concludes every single book on my physical TBR. I believe that was about 45 or 46 books, which is not great, but I have seen other people, specifically on BookTube, I don't know about real life, who have TBRs of over 100 books that they have yet to read, which sounds very overwhelming. I am overwhelmed by the 45 or 46 books that I have to read, so I couldn't even imagine having hundreds of books to read. But yeah, this was very insightful to remember the books that I have on my shelf to read because I intermix my books of books that I have read and have not read. So sometimes the books I haven't read kind of blend in to my bookshelves and I forget that they're there. But anyways, that concludes this video. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you made it this far. And until next time, I'll see you later.